Joining us now is Frank Zaccanelli.
Frank Zaccanelli.
Frank Zaccanelli.
Frank Zaccanelli.
Let's welcome Frank Zaccanelli.
Live from the Real News Studios in Dallas, Texas, welcome to the To Be Frank Show. Your host, Frank Zaccanelli, has been in the world of domestic and international business and professional sports for 40 years. And as a former minority owner, president, and general manager of the Dallas Mavericks, he's been asked to comment on current events in the national news for most of his professional career. But what he and many others are really looking for is a place to find just the facts. Welcome to the To Be Frank Show.
Live from Dallas, Texas, the To Be Frank Show. Welcome to the Thursday edition. My name is Frank Zaccanelli, and I'm your host today, as always, of the To Be Frank Show. I'm excited to have everyone listening and watching today. We got a really exciting show. We're not going to have a guest today. We spent the whole show on Monday. Whoever hasn't seen that show needs to go and find that show. You find it at frankzaccanelli.com. It's on Facebook. It's on YouTube. Go find the show because we had Art Acevedo, the police chief of Houston, for the whole hour. And it was a fantastic show, and we've gotten big views on it, and we're really happy to have had Art on the show. Now, you can reach our show at the To Be Frank Show YouTube, the To Be Frank Show LinkedIn, the To Be Frank Show Twitter, and the To Be Frank Show Facebook, as well as the ToBeFrankShow.com. So those are the vehicles in which carry our show. We're now talking about dealing on just the audio portions. I'm in discussions now about having this be on vehicles just on the audio portion of the podcast. So I'll be making an announcement on that in the next week or so. But I'm in discussions now about that, which will take our viewership up probably 3-4-fold. And so I'm working on that now. But right now, these are the vehicles that you'll be able to find the show. So again, I want to thank you for watching, and I want to thank you for supporting our show. All right, so today we're going to have a pre-monologue, and then we're going to have 4 segments. There's a ton of news out there. I mean, all you have to do is either, pick up your computer, go on your iPhone, turn on your television, turn on your radio. It's amazing on what's going on in the country right now. And when you really look at it, it's indicative of a country that is deeply divided and a country that is really not hitting on all cylinders. I mean, when you talk about Washington, D.C., as I've said many times on the show, is broken. And if you turn on your news channels, if you turn on your cable channels, you're really not going to get the straight story. And that's one of the reasons why we started this show. I hear from a lot of people now that are avid viewers of the show. I probably got 30 unpaid co-producers, if you will, that are sending me stuff and calling me. And, I'm happy to listen, and I'm happy to look at the information. But what's clear to me is that what people really want in this country is they want some form of governance. They want some form of unity. They want their tax dollars to be spent properly. And they want to be able to get their kids to school. Big issue. They want to be able to get their kids to school safely. That's something that we've talked about on multiple shows about how all that occurs. And I think that, again, we're going to, as the schools are opening now, we're going to see what the results are. I'm a little bit in fear that we're going to get some bad reports. We're going to get some numbers probably that are going to be a bit unsettling. And we're going to have to really take a look and deal with it. The school situation, though, has been politicized like every other thing in this country. Every single thing in this country is being politicized right now. We're 61 days, 60 days from the election, okay? And here's the problem. The problem is that logic and common sense has exited now stage left. There's no more of that. And there will be no more of that until after the election. Now, we're going to give you some statistics in one of the segments of the actual monologue that is going to be very disturbing. It was very disturbing to me. in terms of a poll that was taken and how the numbers washed out on certain issues that I think are really important, that are indicators to what I just said. So we're going to talk a little bit about that in the segment. But let's go to the pre-monologue. The pre-monologue, the first issue is really about, Trump is threatening to pull federal funds from some of these cities that are having all the problems as it relates to the riots. I mean, again, there are certain people in the media that want to call these protests. It's insulting to the real people that protest legally. It's insulting. And again, every show we talk about the First Amendment right, a basis for our country and our Constitution, our people's right to free speech and to be able to go out into the streets and protest peacefully. That is a big, big differential between us and Russia, us and China, us and a lot of the places around the world. The United States of America stands for freedom, and that is freedom of speech. And so these protests are things that are really important to the American culture. But we're no longer in that. And we're not there because of what I consider to be a lack of leadership in certain cities in this country that are not only not stopping the rioting, but they're almost encouraging it. And then what they're doing is they're blaming it on political motivations to basically try to tell their story about how it's not their fault. And again, everybody who's watched, this is, I think, the 21st show. People know I am not a political show. I'm the sworn enemy against that. I will not do that. But I have to talk about the facts. And the facts is that Republican-controlled cities are not experiencing the turmoil that Washington, D.C., Seattle, Portland, and Chicago. You're just not seeing this in places like Houston or Dallas, Charlotte, North Carolina. You're not seeing this. And so the problem with this is that this is being driven by something far greater than just the problem. And then you're hearing an incredible amount about why this is occurring. And what happens is both sides are blaming each other. Now, as I see it, okay, Trump's ability to pull the federal funding, and I'd have to really get into the intimate details. I couldn't find exactly what would happen because then there's going to be court cases and there's going to be all kinds of litigation and things. But what he's doing, and I think he's doing it politically, and I think it's smart to do it politically, and not to agree with the Donald. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But I agree with him here that something's got to be done. Something has to be done, okay? New York City is a mess. And let me give you a quote. Their governor, son of Mario Cuomo, #1 governor maybe in the history of the world, but certainly the greatest governor to ever serve in New York State. Andrew Cuomo, quote, he can't have enough bodyguards. He's talking about the Donald. He can't have enough bodyguards to walk through the streets of New York City. Can't have enough bodyguards. And he better have an army if he plans on coming to New York City. All right? Well, Andrew, I'll call you Andrew. All right? You got to stop with the bird watching. Okay? You're up in Albany. You're not doing anything to solve the problem. You want to write books and you want to talk about how great you are, and then you go on your brother's show. Okay? I mean, that's really where we are here. Not to pick on you specifically, but I got to call balls and strikes on this show. That's what I'm trying to do. We're going to get to the Republicans in a minute. But I got to call balls and strikes. #1, Andrew, he has an army. Okay? He's the commander-in-chief of the #1 army in the world. So, let's start there. #2, these comments could be based on a threat from you to him. So you better be careful there. Now, I know you don't care about that, but, you need to take a look at how that looks, all right? When Trump is saying that if you need help, he just can't go into these places because of the laws and just take over and go into Seattle and clean it up. Go into Chicago and clean it up. We're going to talk about Chicago at length because things have gotten untenable there, untenable. But New York City, okay, crime is up, everything's up, the city's falling apart, people are leaving, all right, they're leaving. I mean, I don't know, Andrew, with your binoculars on your bird watching sessions, if you can't see the fact that the city's falling apart, all right? But, you know, if the Donald is saying, please get your cities in order, he's not doing it because it's a good political move, even though it is. It's just nobody can watch this stuff anymore. I'm not a political guy at all, and I can't watch it. But all we hear of is, oh, Trump caused this. How the hell did he cause this? That's what this idiot in Portland, Teddy Wheeler's been talking about. Well, Trump caused all this. Well, Teddy, you can't even go back to your house now, okay? Because lawlessness breeds other lawlessness. And Lori Lightfoot, the mayor of Chicago, she's having problems, you know, going back into her neighborhood. She's had to call the police. I mean, what do you expect? If you think you're going to embrace these anarchists, these aren't protesters. If you think you're going to embrace these people, you're not going to embrace them. You can't be friends with them. It's like the Donald. The Donald gets on TV, oh, I'm buddies with President Xi in China. You're not friends with him. He doesn't give a crap about you, our country, or anything else. These anarchists hate our country. And they're going to hate you. They hate everybody. It's the way it works. But the Donald has made an announcement that he's going to pull back some federal funding. Don't think he can do it, but I want to watch and see what the mechanisms of which he's talking about that. Now, on the other side, Joey Biden. Now, this is pretty funny, okay? It's funny. His new nickname now from the Donald is Joey Hayden because he won't come out of the basement. Now, he did come out of the basement, I think it was yesterday, and he actually took a few planted questions, okay? How do you know they're planted questions? Because if I'm there, I could ask 5 questions that everybody really wants to know about it, unless you hate Trump so bad you don't want him to answer questions. But what about your family? What about your son? What's going on with all of that? What happened in China with your son? What happened in Russia? You know, what happened with all this stuff? Ukraine, excuse me. Okay? Plus, there's a million other things. You want to get rid of cows and you want to get rid of airplanes? Okay, what about that one? You know, there's a lot of stuff. And I want to hear the answers. The only people that don't want to hear the answers are the people on the Democratic side that hate Trump so bad, they just want to get rid of him. Now, on the Donald side, okay, let's talk about the Donald. He's got a new move. You know what his move is? Holds a press conference. As soon as he gets a question he doesn't like, he walks off the stage. That's it. Game over. I'm done. Walks off. Now, that's not very much better, okay? But it's a little bit better because at least he's out there taking the fire. Biden is going to lose the election if he continues to act the way that he's been acting. He's going to lose. And we're going to get into the polls that are tightening up. And I'm going to tell you why. But he's also going to lose if he doesn't completely condemn this violence. Now, yesterday, he condemned the violence. But now, Joe, you got to do something about it. You got to call up these Democratic leaders and say, listen, you got to stop this. I'll tell you this, it's a hell of a political move. If I'm advising Biden, I'm like, call these mayors and these governors and let's stop this, because all you're doing is giving Trump a big blowhorn to continue to beat the hell out of you and beat the hell out of the Democrats because of it. I've said this a month ago, that this would become Joe Biden's coronavirus. So that's the way that this one is coming down. But Trump is now talking about, I'm not going to fund these cities with federal dollars. Now, there's something else that's going to happen here. I'm going a little bit longer on this than I had planned, but this is important stuff. The states, and let's just take two, of California and New York are going broke. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about the city of Chicago and what the lack of tax base is doing to their budget. It's a gigantic problem. And we're also going to talk on this show about the stock market. And we're going to talk about how that's no indication of what the hell's going on out there. I'm telling you, I'm out of the market right now. And a lot of my smart friends are out of the market right now. If I had nothing better to do, I'd probably start shorting the market. Because this rise is based on, I'm trying to figure out what the hell's going on. I've been doing this for a long time. I mean, you're setting records every day. And I can't figure it out because all I see is a lot of turmoil in the country. But let's go to California and New York. I'm going to tell you something. For all of you fine people there, California is now trying to raise the state income tax about 4 percentage points, I think to 16%. 16% of your income is going to go to the state of California outside of what you pay in federal taxes. And they have on the ballot a wealth tax. Now, some of the details are still a little sketchy, but let me tell you something. A wealth tax, you're going to see businesses move out of there in droves. There are going to be caravans leaving. Kind of like what Billy D. de Blasio is doing with Cuomo in New York City. Now, in New York City, here's what you got to worry about. I know some people that will be affected by this, and it's terrible. The state pension plan, let's hope, doesn't get in trouble. Okay? But the state of New York is losing tax revenue like you can't add it up. There's not a computer big enough to add up what's going on there. And in New York, they want to keep the economy shut down. Okay? I have said from the beginning, there has to be a plan to smartly and scientifically open up the economy. But you can't keep the economy shut down for very much longer in the system of government that we have. In France, in Italy, in Austria, and name 100 other places. They're socialist countries, okay? They have taxes that are 60, 70% of what you make. So this is how they run their governments. We don't do that here. We're a capitalist society. It can't work. We're going to have a breakdown. But I can't help but to really think that some of these shutdowns, and they're all in Democratic cities, are a political move against Donald Trump. And if that is, shame on you. And if you live in one of those states, you should get corporal tunnel from writing so many letters to these people to say, what the hell are you doing? Look at the independent businesses that are on the rocks. And we're going to get to some of those statistics. It's unbelievable. These are the people that I care about. I don't care about these wealth tax people that are leaving California, and they will. You know, they got plenty of money. All right? I'm worried about the family. I'm worried about the people that built their whole lives around hard work. And these are the people that are suffering. You can't just shut the economy down. But this is what some of these places, all Democratic in control, are doing. Just not right. Okay. The stock market is not an indicator of the United States situation on the economy. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, here's my point. If you take a look at the NASDAQ, if you don't follow the stock market much, I'll try to explain it as simply as I can. You've got two different vehicles in which stocks are traded predominantly in the United States. You have the Dow Jones Industrial and you have the NASDAQ. The NASDAQ has got more tech companies, and the Dow Jones has companies like Exxon, IBM, you know, all the traditional companies. So for those of you that don't pay attention to that, but I think that everybody pays somewhat attention to it because now everybody's got a 401k. And if you go look at your 401k, you're going to be really happy this afternoon because the NASDAQ is at a record level and the Dow Jones Industrial is approaching another record level. But here's my problem. Take a look at the fundamentals. I mean, you still have half the people that were affected by this coronavirus, some 50 million people. You still have almost half of those people that are still not working, that are still out there on unemployment. I mean, you have to kind of give it to the Donald. You know, he juiced the economy by doing a lot of smart things, okay? He did. And, you know, got rid of regulations that were killing the economy. He had a tax break issue where he passed a tax savings to everybody. And he basically tariffed the hell out of countries that were stealing our jobs, okay? Those three things were responsible for a 3.8% unemployment rate, job growth like we've never seen. So he deserves credit for that, okay? He deserves a lot of blame for other things, but he deserves credit for that. You can't take it away from him. But when you look at where we stand today, half of those jobs are still gone and the stock market's going crazy. Now, on a show prior, I mentioned that there may not be any other alternatives to cash, okay? You got a bunch of cash hanging around. What do you do with it? Well, if you put it in the bank, you don't get basically any interest on your money, okay? You just don't. Back in the day, you'd be getting 6-7% on your money, and you'd be happy. You'd go and tell your wife, hey, listen, look what I did for you, honey. This is the greatest, you know, give me a kiss on the cheek. You know, you would parade around with how well you were doing. In today's world, there's no alternative use to the cash. And so now that could be flooding into the market, and there's another dynamic. Now, I'll give you the other one. The other dynamic is the fact that the rest of the world sees the United States as a safe haven. And so I think money is pouring into our stock market because of the uncertainty in a lot of other countries. I know in China, personal reference, you know, I went there and raised a bunch of money. I know they want to get their money the hell out of there. You know, the Chinese, when they come here on these visas, the only thing they want is they want to get some of their money out of there and they want their children to go to school here, okay? You know, they want to get away from this repressive government that they're under the thumb of. So when we look at the stock market, okay, and we analyze it, don't use that as an indication, even though across the board everybody's happy because their 401k is much better. God bless you. I'm happy for you. But there are still an enormous amount of people that are being affected by this, and I believe that sooner or later that's going to catch up to the growth in the country, and it's going to catch up to the growth of the GNP, because there are a lot of people that are out of work. You know, in August 29th, there were 881,000 workers that sought unemployment. That was about 100,000 less than what was projected. Okay, so that's a good thing. But since the shutdown, I said it was 59 million people in the United States of America at one point has applied for unemployment benefits. And there's still more than 20 million of those people that are still on unemployment. That does not designate to me that we're in a healthy economy. And I think some of it is self-imposed. Some of this is because of political motivations to shut down the economy. That's wrong. And so these are things that we've got to really take a hard look at. And then what's going to happen after the election? If Trump loses, is everybody all of a sudden going to say, okay, let's now open it up? I've said this over and over and over. There has to be a dual responsibility to getting out of this coronavirus mess. Well, first of all, we got to get a vaccine. And there's been some news on vaccines. They're talking about several months from now. The question is, how many doses? Is it safe? When can everybody get a vaccine? Because the vaccine is going to be exactly like the testing. Everybody's not going to be able to get it right away. And the testing in this country still is goofy to me, okay? It's way more readily available than it was 2 months ago, so there's progress. But the fact of the matter is, The results take forever, and that doesn't really help anybody. But on the vaccine, just remember, there's not going to be enough vaccine for everybody right away. Now, that will build up over time. How long that time is, I don't know. But obviously, the vaccine. But when it comes down to handling this, if I'm the mayor or the governor, first of all, the majority of these mayors can't handle this situation. If you can't see that, don't get out of bed in the morning. You can just look at these mayors. Male, female, black, white, doesn't matter. We're not picking on anybody individually. But they're not qualified to handle a crisis like this. And half the governors aren't qualified for this. They're not. But there's got to be a mix between opening up your country, your city, and your state, and then doing it safely with the appropriate protocols. Let's use the state of Texas, state of Florida, state of Arizona. They opened up. They didn't do it properly. Now they've learned their lesson. And I can tell you in the state of Texas, things are getting much better, much, much better. Now, we may have another surge in the fall and the winter. We got to be careful. Can't let your guard down. But we did it wrong here. But in these states that just won't open the economies, you got to do it, but you got to do it safely. There's got to be a mix. And that's what's got to happen here. But whenever anybody looks at the stock market and you look at your 401k and you're happy, and again, I'm happy for you, just think about all those people that are still out of work where their businesses have dried up and they have no hope now. I mean, these are the people that we got to concern ourselves with. Okay. And then we have the liberal mayors who have supported the protests. Well, the mayor of D.C. just had her house protested. They want her to move. They're all over. I don't have a problem with her, okay? I don't. You know, she's lost in my opinion. Okay, she is. Is she more lost than Bill de Blasio and Ted Wheeler? No. Okay? But she's lost. All right? She's so politically motivated, she really, doesn't think about things in the right manner. But that's okay. We're not going to pick on her specifically. But you take a look at these liberal mayors now. You take a look at the situation. Okay? Now, they're in harm's way. Okay? And they're still calling what's going on in their cities. They're still using the term protests. Now look, this all started out with George Floyd and the Black Lives Movement, matter, okay? I've been very candid about the Black Lives Matter movement, and I'm going to talk some about that in a segment, and I've got a really good thing for them to concentrate on. So I've been really racking my brain to figure this one out because I want to be a positive part of this. I want this show to be a positive part of this. But when you look at some of these mayors and you look at their policies and you look at the way that they have defended what's going on in their city, they're now the targets. If that doesn't tell you something, I don't know what does. And at some level, you got to check your ego, your politics at the door. And you got to do what's best for the people that elected you. That's your job. And I think in a lot of these cases, it's to pick up the phone and call the administration and say, get the feds in here. You still have the ability to deal with your governors, now not in D.C., okay? But in all these other places, you still have the ability to deal with your governors and bring in the National Guard, okay? This isn't that complicated, but we can't have lawlessness. And let me tell you, because of the way that some of these mayors have spoken and talked about this, there's no fear of these anarchists anymore. There's not. They're not fearing retribution. They're not fearing that they're going to go to jail for a long time. There's no fear. And so that's creating a whole situation that is not good. The hate in this country, though, about Donald Trump, and he's created his fair share of the hate, believe me, came in with a wrecking ball, okay? That's where he thought he was elected, but he was never, in my opinion, other than on the economic side, on the economy side, because he didn't discriminate there at all. He just said, I'm putting everybody to work. And he did it. But he came in with a wrecking ball politically. If he doesn't expect that there's going to be backlash, and then there's insult after insult after insult, I just wish there was a little bit more diplomacy. I just wish there was a little bit more tact to how elected officials realize that they're elected because their job is to work with the other side and get legislation passed that improves the lives of the people of the United States. So that's where we have it here. We're going to get to the monologue, but that's where we have things at this moment. And you got a situation right now to where now the mayors who have stuck up for these protests, which they're not, they're riots, are now under siege. So I hope that that's sending a message maybe to them and like-minded people of them that ultimately can understand, just have law and order in your city, because you know who's getting hurt? The independent business person that put his life on the line. And sooner or later, they're leaving. Okay, let's go to the monologue. The first segment is the Donald. How can you not start with anything but the Donald in today's deal? And he's calling on two individual members of the media to be fired. Okay? Now let me just throw this out to you. Okay? And everybody think about this in their own lives, in their own terms. Donald, don't you have more important things to do than worry about Cuomo's brother on CNN, okay, and Joy Reid on MSNBC? Don't you have more important things to do? I don't understand why this is such a distraction to you. You're calling for the networks of these people, okay, to fire these people where these networks hate your guts. And you hate them. I mean, it is what it is. But I don't know why you're wasting your time with this. You know, it just provides more fodder, more division, more everything. I mean, first of all, you know, Joy Reid, you're not going to talk to her about anything. At NBC, they are paid to take Donald Trump and the Republicans down. That's what that is, okay? Now, they believe it. They believe in their own ideology, and they have a right to be able to do that. They're not breaking any laws. You know, they're not going to jail for this, okay? Joy Reid's got some wacky ideas in my mind, but so does Sean Hannity. You know, so does Tucker Carlson. You know, they got some wacky ideas. But you're not going to be able to get to this, Donald. Chris Cuomo. Now, you call him Fredo, okay? Now, everybody knows who Fredo was in The Godfather. He was the wayward son that pulled out the gun and couldn't shoot the gun, and poor Fredo and all that stuff. You're calling the guy names. You're 61 days out from an election. Why don't we concentrate on figuring out how we're going to get the country to move in the right direction? Roll the tape.
Important for that role. So it's interesting to note that among Michael Cohen's close personal friends is an anchor on the cable news network, and not just any CNN anchor, but the CNN anchor given to the most overheated possible moral lectures. The first guy on that channel to invoke God himself and the Blessed Mother if necessary, as he scolds you for not living up to his high ethical standards. That man's name is Christopher Charles Cuomo, son of one governor, brother of another, Yale graduate, weightlifter, deeply good person. And also, we now learn, a buddy of Michael Cohen's. We know this because we have an audio tape of a conversation between the two men. Apparently, there are many tapes like this. But tonight, we're going to play you just a portion of one. Before you listen to this, try to remember what Chris Cuomo sounds like when you watch him on television. You've seen him, admit it. Then compare that version, that memory, the official morally inflated Chris Cuomo, to the guy you hear in this recording. Here you go.
You know, I'm always careful when I talk to media, you know?
Right.
Do you know how many phone calls I've gotten from people at ABC who say that reporters are calling and lying about things they heard about me to try to get stories about me when I was at ABC? Guys calling and saying, I heard he was the Charlie Rose of ABC, used to invite women to the hotel and open his bathroom. Do I look like the kind of guy who's got to do that?
Sure, why not? But you're
lying. So I already have a good source that says that he forced one woman to have sex. I just want to know if you've ever heard anything like that. There is no woman.
Right.
There is none of that.
So here's the problem.
Women who do work there saying, oh yeah, some of these men, and naming me with other guys, we bumped into each other once in the elevator and he put his hand on my shoulder and he made me really uncomfortable. I mean, what the
It's a problem, and now you.
So I'm careful with the media always.
Right.
I've always told you the media is not your friend.
No.
All right. Now look at the graphics, okay? I mean, come on, Tucker. I mean, look at the graphics of this. Other than the fact that Chris Cuomo's actually talking to one of the biggest scumbags in the history of the United States, which, oh, by the way, was very close to the Donald and was his fixer, okay? That's a bad mark against Donald. Michael Cohen is a bad guy, period, end of conversation. So short of that, there's nothing there other than Tucker, you want to put up these graphics that make this thing, even worse. Now, between you and me, yeah, he's a weightlifter. He'd probably beat the living shit out of you, if you ever got in the gym with him. So I'd be careful there. But, is Chris Cuomo, am I a Chris Cuomo fan? No. Am I going to just pick on him for the sake of picking on him? No, I'm not. I pick on his brother because he's an elected official, and he deserves to be picked on. But his father was one of the all-time greats. He comes from good stock. Now, what he's done, like everybody else at CNN, they bought into an ideology and they sold out. All right? It's what it is. But this is nothing for the guy to be fired over. I listened to the whole thing 3 times. I mean, the bottom line is I don't think Chris Cuomo's a bad guy. Okay? But this is how things are being portrayed in the media. It's almost impossible to watch. And then the Donald's calling for his firing. Okay? Yeah, let's fire him. What are you going to fire him over? I don't get it. Now, Joy Reid is another one. She's the NBC kind of talking head host, the whole deal. She is defending the Black Lives Matter movement. That's fine. She's an African-American woman. She has every right to do that. Insisting that all they're doing is protesting. Now, Joy, first of all, the Black Lives Matter movement and all of the African Americans that started peacefully protesting in this country over the wrongful killing of George Floyd, basically have exited stage left. They're gone. You see maybe 20% African Americans. The rest of them are anarchists. They're white anarchists, whatever they are. Now, of course, everyone wants to blame the white supremacists. Whatever the hell that is, yeah. The KKK, this, that. Are they involved? I don't know if they're involved. Is Antifa involved? Sounds like it. But you can't stick up for any of these groups. The white supremacists are as bad as the radical African-American haters. It's all the same. Hate is hate. Okay? But Joy, these aren't protests. I don't know how you could watch CNBC, and I know a lot of people do, and people that watch this show watch MSNBC. It just, you're being gaslighted. You're being told things that just aren't accurate, but it's to fit a narrative. And the only thing now that's important, our house could be on fire. It's the election. We have to get rid of this guy. Okay? That's all it's about. And so I'm just trying to point out some obvious things. But Donald Trump has more important things to worry about than publicly now calling for the firing of 2 media members. I just think it's a complete waste of time. Okay. Segment 2. This is really a great story. And I'm going to add a bunch of anecdotes to this. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about how we actually do something and we actually fix things. There was announced that there was a merger of 2 African-American owned banks last week that created the largest owned African-American bank. They merged. And one was in Washington, D.C., and I'll give you the names in a minute, and one was in Los Angeles. This was the brightest news on the Black Lives Matter movement front that I've seen in a while. And I'm going to talk a little bit about things that I was involved with that are possibly helpful to this whole story. But the LA Times reported that LA Broadway Federal Bank and Washington, D.C.'s City First Bank are now merging and form the largest U.S. bank, African-American-owned U.S. bank in the country. It underscores the challenges that minority banks have faced not being able to generate enough bank monies to be able to really do things that have to be done in the minority community. But this merger has now created the largest, and to bank standards, it is literally a pimple on the back of Bank of America, Wells Fargo, etc. Okay? We're still talking incredibly small numbers compared to the major banks. But I think this is a step in the right direction. And let me talk about that. First off, if we really wanted to do something in this country, the major banks, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, just to name a few, there's a bunch of them, okay? They should go out and they should find minority banks that they can have, that they can work with, that ultimately can then provide these minority banks more liquidity to do things in the inner city. I think that should be mandated. I really, honestly do. I think the federal government should step up and make sure that the big banks, and even some of the big Wall Street firms, but I'm going to get to them in a minute, but the big banks take under their wing these African American owned and Latino owned minority banks to give them the strength and the power to be able to do certain things that they're not presently able to do. The reason this merger took place is because both banks came to the same conclusion. Independently, we can't do enough. Now, collectively, can they do enough? They can do more. But can they do enough? No. There's got to be another step here. So for everybody that's out there that is concerned about the Black Lives Matter movement, okay, this beats putting things on your jersey. This beats not standing for the national anthem. This beats it all. Let's figure out how these African American owned banks can get the help and support they need from the bigger banks that allow for them almost to be a subsidiary of, even though they're independently owned and run, but where they become stronger because now these bigger banks see the value, not only financially, but see the value of being able to clean up our inner cities. I think this was a wonderful thing. I'm going to follow this thing, and I'm really, really, really going to be a proponent of the bigger banks, and if it has to be federally mandated, then federally mandated. And this is something that Trump and Biden should be talking about. Again, the Donald, he watches the show, but he's got the sound down. He's in the Oval Office, and he's not complaining about Fredo at CNN and Joy, Reid, but he's watching. So when you replay the tape tonight, Donald, just pay attention to this. And Joe Biden, you are the guy that is really working hard on the African-American vote. This is something that can really make a difference. This is something that could start moving things in the right direction. Now, let's get to the Wall Street firms. Everyone knows who Magic Johnson is. I'm a big fan. And I got to know Irvin a little bit during my NBA days and then shortly after. Here's a guy that really built one hell of a business. And he did it because he's really smart and he did it the right way. But he really got his start in big financial matters being an understudy to a non-minority owned equity firm and a hedge fund. And he was able to support them as a minority kind of compliance scenario that ultimately really built his company. I'll give you a statistic. Everybody knows, and throughout the whole country, every single state in the union has a state pension fund, and some have multiple state pension funds. In California, because it's such a big state, they have two. Okay? And when you add up just in California the size of those state pension funds, I think when you add them up, it's $500, $600, $700 billion. Okay? Now, the reason that they're so big is every state employee contributes to the state pension fund, and that's where their retirement comes from. Well, what has to happen between the time their money goes in and the time they get it 35 years later? Well, that money's got to be invested. Now, every state has a state pension fund, at least one. All right? So here's the deal. Last count, when I went out and studied this, and I studied this hard years ago, 35 to 37% of the contributions in these state pension funds are minorities. Now, you want to talk about the biggest Wall Street firms in Wall Street? You want to talk about them? They're predominantly built by these funds. Okay? I've lived it. They're predominantly built. They get billions and billions and billions of dollars from these state pension funds because the state pension funds have to reinvest this money. They can't let it just sit there in a vault. Well, it's created some of the greatest wealth in United States history. That's how all these hedge funds, private equity firms, and everything else have been started and capitalized and generated. So how about this one? So how about we use the Magic Johnson scenario, okay? How about, along with the bigger banks now supporting the minority-owned banks in the inner city, it's good business and it's good for our country. How about we have more participation from the Wall Street firms to minority-owned young investment companies, okay? We create them. I mean, you have to understand again, this is the biggest statistic I'll give you all day. 35 to 37% of the money comes from these people, but they manage less than 5%. Now, you tell me how that's fair. Well, it's not. And I've been on this now for years, but I think it's apropos today to talk about it in conjunction with this bank situation now in this merger. These are the things that can make our country better. These are the things that can start to clean up our inner cities. But in order to clean up our inner cities, and we're going to get to it, there's got to be a couple of steps before that. We're going to talk about that. But I'll cover this even further. But this is really an important subject. And the subject really now, instead of painting stuff, which all this is okay. It's okay. But instead of painting Black Lives Matter everywhere, let's do something about it. Okay. The next, you know what? We have a tape on this. Roll the tape.
Oldest black-owned and managed savings and loan on the West Coast turns 75 next year with a new partner and a growing mission. New at 5, NBC4's Patrick Healy talked to the CEO of Broadway Federal about expanding opportunities for low-income communities.
This model will allow us to do something that the black community has always wanted to do.
CEO Wayne Bradshaw has for more than a decade been at the helm of Broadway Federal, the enduring savings and loan for South Los Angeles. Its mission evolving since its founding, its purpose continuing.
We are creating good living space for those in the greatest need.
In recent years, Broadway has focused on funding construction of small to mid-size apartment buildings.
The occupants of the buildings that we finance are all the working poor.
I'm saying take $100, put it in a bank.
Supported by hip-hop artists, #BankBlack has encouraged savings deposits. But like the dwindling number of black-led banks serving low to moderate income communities, Broadway Federal has been held back by lack of capital to fund loan demand. Bradshaw's solution, the newly announced merger with another small black-led bank, City First in Washington, D.C.
This is a pretty historic moment for our community, and I think we have created a model that we'll be able to scale up and really be impactful.
Bradshaw foresees this as a first step toward expanding into other urban centers.
Is that the idea then, to create this national bank with a presence in multiple cities?
Very much so, yes. That is the intent.
Another heady step forward for the bank co-founded 74 years ago by famed architect Paul Williams, who designed grand public buildings and homes for the rich and famous, but also saw a need to ensure that people of color and lesser means had access to loans and housing.
We believe that we're carrying on that legacy.
Now, the merger is a good thing, and it's step one. But step two is the bigger banks have to get involved here. Again, it's good business, and it's good for our country. So we're going to stay on this one. And then what I said about the state pension funds, everybody do their own homework here. This is an enormous hole in what needs to be done to level this playing field a little bit. Okay, let's go to the third segment. This is a disturbing segment. It's got to be covered. The FBI reports that Chicago gangs are now plotting to shoot cops. They've now set a pact together, okay? Now, there's all kinds of problems in this. First of all, it's been reported that there's 30 gangs that are involved with this. Now, let me stop you right here. You want to get down to the core? If there's 30 gangs in your city, there shouldn't be any gangs in your city. There's 30 gangs. There may be more. I mean, there's problem number one, all right? But when we take a look at this, and now they're planning on shooting police officers, okay, now that they've set a pact together, I don't know how much longer Governor Lori Lightfoot, who I have gone out of my way not to get on, and J.B. Pritzker, who I can get on all I want now because he's the governor of this mess. And he comes from a very wealthy family. He's very well educated. You know, he's part of the Bird Watcher Club. He's in his, office, and he's got binoculars, and he's part of this Bird Watcher Governor Club. Okay? What are you doing, JB? I mean, this thing is out of control. Send in not only the National Guard, but call for help from the feds and clean this mess up, because if you don't clean it up, everything that I just mentioned in the prior segment about banks and inner cities, none of this is going to work. 30 gangs. I mean, that alone is an unbelievable problem. Roll the tape.
The FBI warning Chicago police about a pact among street gangs to shoot on sight any officer who draws their weapon on someone in public. This as the city grapples with the rise in violent crime. Shootings are up more than 80% from last August. Police Superintendent David Brown on the disturbing trend.
Violent offenders have acted with impunity, much more than we've seen in the past so far this year. And I think 51 officers being shot at or shot in 1 year, I think that quadruples any previous year in Chicago's history. So I think it's more than a suggestion that people are seeking to do harm to cops.
Joining me now is former police officer and Chicago Alderman Anthony Napolitano. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
This is a really distressing and scary story. And it goes along with that rise in violence that we have been talking about in Chicago. Let me ask you, do you talk to cops on the street there now? What kinds of things do they say, and what do they need?
Yeah, I talk to cops on a regular basis. Where I live up on the Northwest Side, it's known as Copland. This is where mostly all your police officers and firefighters and city workers live. They realize what's going on. We've all been saying it as a group in a neighborhood. The the last 5-8 years, this anti-police movement, this defund the police movement, has created a brazen attitude with criminals in the city of Chicago. And we knew then that this is what it was going to bring. We knew that criminals were going to be so emboldened to put bounties on police officers. We saw this coming and we warned people of it, and it fell on deaf ears. And now we're dealing with this just ridiculous ideology to defund the police, asking to take money away from the police. We need more police officers on the street.
David Brown, the police chief, the African-American police chief that you saw in that video, I want to give you a quote from him. He says, quote, "I think 51 cops being shot or shot at in 1 year, I think that quadruples the previous year." He's talking about this year, we're only in September. 51 cops shot at. Some shot. You want to know something? This has got to stop. I mean, again, we got to be the Common Sense Show, right? That's going to be the new name, Common Sense Show. Watch the Common Sense Show. I mean, how much more does it have to take in order to get somebody to do something about this? Because do you understand the siege that these African-American moms and their children are living with in these neighborhoods? Okay? 30 gangs. We got to put the politics aside. It's got to be put aside, Pritzker and Miss Lightfoot. It's got to be put aside now. And Lori Lightfoot, in her, infinite wisdom, if you will, is now alerting people that there's a $1.2 billion shortfall in the Chicago budget because of the coronavirus, because of a lot of things, because of riots, because of what's happened on Michigan Avenue. Now, I've said for a long time that on the west side of Chicago, who's ever not been there, it's something to be seen. It's terrible. And a good friend of mine grew up there, and he took me through there. And the south side's got a couple problems in Chicago. But they were isolated, okay? They were isolated. And you know what happened to the population in Chicago? They became numb. Well, it doesn't affect me. I'm not affected. I live up here in Suburbanville. I'm okay. Well, that's not the case anymore. You now take a look at what's happened with the coronavirus. Now, Chicago and the state of Illinois is another situation where you're going to open up your city. We're going to now figure out how we can mix science with common sense and economics. I'm not saying do what they did in Florida, Texas, Georgia, and Arizona. I'm not saying that. I'm saying commonsensical. But something's got to happen here. Because you know what? If this doesn't happen, then everything in my last segment I'm talking about how we actually fix the problem, you got to fix this first before we can get to the problem. I don't know what the hell these elected officials are waiting on. Waiting on Joe Biden to win? Might not win. This has been going on for years and years. Barack Obama cared deeply about the city of Chicago. Nothing happened. So this is the problem. I mean, it doesn't even seem like we're in the United States, but this is the issue. Okay, in the last segment, Trump versus Biden. What a story, okay? His new nickname, Joe Biden. I thought that was a good one, Donald. I don't like the nicknames, but sometimes they're colorful, they're catchy, okay? It's pretty good. I mean, again, I'm not for either one of these guys. It's pretty funny. The latest USA Suffolk University poll that I thought was pretty comprehensive, the latest one, Biden 50, Trump 43. Now, the advantage 2 months ago was a 12-point advantage for Biden. Now it's a 7-point advantage for Biden. There's no question about the fact that we predicted it on this show. The closer we get to the election, the polls are going to close. Get closer. Not close, get closer. And we're seeing it. Now, again, missteps on both sides. Again, it's easy for me to sit here, right? I'm a Monday morning quarterback. I can sit here and I can criticize the whole shooting match. But I see some of the missteps. I see them. You know, the Donald, quit picking on these reporters, you know, quit basically saying that, you know, QAnon's an okay organization, and just get out there and tell your story. What are you going to do for the people? Joe, just get out there. You got the nickname now, Hayden, and it's going to stick. You got to get out there. And I'll tell you an amazing thing. Kamala Harris, I really, really thought she'd be out there every day. I don't see much of her. I don't know what they're doing. But I said a month ago, I said Joe Biden's coronavirus, because the coronavirus took Donald Trump's numbers down by 12%. They did. When he was down 12, it was coronavirus. It was his mishandling in people's opinion, and I don't think it was handled properly, so I have to say it. I know a lot of people disagree with me. What'd you expect him to do? He shut down Asia. No, he did all that. He did it. Not like he did everything wrong. He just downplayed it. Thought it was going to go away. Said it was going to go away. All right? Now, for Joe Biden, he's now coming around, oh, we got to clean up these cities, and we're not for lawlessness, and we're not for these protested riots and everything. Well, Joe, do something about it. You know, call up your Democratic colleagues. Call up the people of Chicago. You want to get the independent vote? You want to really now talk to me about my vote? Do something. You know, they won't take Trump's call. They hate Trump. I get it. Okay, it's stupid of them to do that, but why don't you do something about it? See, this is the point. We could sit here and argue about it all day long. It's like the Black Lives Matter movement. It's worth having that movement. We just have to do something. We have to be able to create change. Now, the police side of it, you know, we had I think the number one police chief in the whole country on the show, last show. If you didn't see it, go to it. For the whole show. And this guy is so down the middle and so connected with this. He really has the secret sauce, right? On things that you have to do. He talks about the fact that in 4 years he had to get rid of 160 cops. That's a lot of cops dealing with the unions and everything else you got to deal with. Okay, we got to do better on the policing side. We have to do it. Got to get to the bottom of this Jacob Blake mess. Okay? Don't shoot the guy in the back 7 times. I've said over and over and over, you tackle him on the lawn. You don't let him get to the car. You know, there's a lot of issues there. They're all going to come out. But the fact of the matter is, we're in the middle of the most vicious campaign in the history of the United States of America. Again, if you think it's bad now, wait a week. Wait 2 weeks. Because this thing is not going to get better. It's going to get worse. It's going to get more vicious. And then we're going to get into debates. But, you know, Donald, just concentrate on the ball. You know, concentrate on being president for everybody and concentrate on the ball. And Joe, get the hell out of the basement. You had a press conference yesterday that was, you know, it was a 4 on a scale of 10. You know, a few planted questions. Go out there and have a real press conference and answer people's questions. Okay? Not going to be able to hide the whole time. You're going to lose the election if you do that. So we're going to watch the polls and we're going to figure it out. Here's a really disturbing, and I'll end the show with this. Here's a really disturbing number. In that same survey, they asked people on the Democratic side, would they in fact accept the election if Donald Trump won the election fairly and squarely? Now, you sitting down, you ready for this? 28% of Biden supporters said they would not accept the election results. 28%. Let's assume he controls 50% of the country. And let's assume that's 175 million. So 28% of 175 million, okay, that's almost 50 million people. Not going to accept the election. I mean, what are we doing, ladies and gentlemen? What are we doing? Now, to show that we're equally based on this show, same question was asked of Trump supporters. What do you think that one was? Well, they win this one, only 19% of those people said they wouldn't accept the election results no matter how fair it was. This is the situation we're in our country. And this is what's got to stop. Okay, that's our show for today. In closing, I have to tell you that this election is going to come down to, my opinion, 10 states. I'm going to read them off to you. And this is where the battleground is going to occur. Okay? Biden's winning New York and California, and people thought that Texas is in play. Trump's winning Texas. Okay? You heard it first here. All right? But there are 10 states that are going to decide this election. They are, in no particular order: Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Iowa, Maine, Michigan, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Okay? So if you're in any of those states, you're going to decide who's the next president of the United States. And if I'm right, that all of the support is here, and you got 20% in the middle, like me, that hadn't made up their mind, okay, you're right here. These are going to be the important people. The 20% in all those states are going to determine the next election. So we're going to watch it. It's going to be interesting. Let's keep an eye on it. All right, so you can see the show at the 2B Frank Show YouTube. You can see the show 2B Frank Show Twitter, 2B Frank Show LinkedIn, 2B Frank Show Facebook, and the 2bfrankshow.com. We're really happy to be doing this show. I'm Frank Zaccanelli. I'm your host. I want everyone to have a safe weekend. Don't let your guard down on this coronavirus, especially in places where it's spiking. And we're getting some reports now in Europe that you're seeing spikes. So we're going to keep an eye on all that. But keep your family safe, and we'll see you on Monday. Thanks for watching.